Hey guys, Tara here, and today I am ever so excited to be able to tell you about my experiences with Remember Me, which is a new IP from Capcom. This is actually also the first game from the developers Don't Nod Entertainment, which is a French company, which sort of makes sense, kind of fits in with the whole French cyberpunk theme that's going on here. I've read a lot of stuff about this game so far, and it seems like there's kind of a divide between people who are really excited for it and think it has a lot of potential, and people who are maybe not so excited and feel like a lot of the mechanics sort of borrow from other games. So aside from the setting, the core gameplay really revolves around three different aspects. Platforming, combat, mostly melee combat, and memory remixing, which is kind of the puzzle element of the game. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to really test that last aspect since my demo cut off before I could get to the memory remixing, but I do have a lot of thoughts on the other parts of the game. First of all, I think it's interesting that it's sort of centered around a non-white male character. The main character is Neelan, who is an elite memory hunter, and her story is kind of shrouded in mystery, and as the game goes on, you start to wonder what happened to her. She wakes up in the very beginning of the game, which is the part that we played, and she sort of wakes up in a coffin or some kind of futuristic sarcophagus and doesn't really know what's happening, and she's trying to track down the people who erased her memory. And so platforming is, like I said, a big part of this game. The game is fairly linear. I want to say mostly linear, especially the platforming. There are certain parts where you'll be able to find collectibles and hidden stashes, and for those parts you can sort of veer off. But for the most part, it's relatively straightforward, and the setting, I think, is probably the most interesting part of the game. It takes place in Neo-Paris in 2084, not so coincidentally 100 years after the setting of 1984, which has very similar themes. I think it's sort of set in like this dystopian surveillance state future where the government is just sort of controlling everything, and she's trying to find out what happened to her. The city of Paris is sort of a divide between like really high-end, high-rise buildings and sort of the slums of Paris, and there's so much detail just in all of the setting. You can see little bugs crawling around, there's trash everywhere in the slums. The combat is particularly interesting, and again, comparison I've heard being made a lot here is Arkham City or some of the Batman games where it's heavily melee focused. So there are no guns in this game at all. But the melee combat is very involved and in-depth, and it revolves around this idea of press-ins, which are basically fighting moves that you can string together to create combos. So you start the game with only two press-ins. One does a lot of damage, and one will increase your health. So there are a finite amount of press-ins that you can string together, and you can sort of customize your combo moves. So if you want to have a really powerful move that does only damage, you can do that, and if you want to have one that really increases your health in sticky situations, then you can do that too. It's very involved at first glance, and it definitely gets more involved as the game goes along, but there are things that they do to sort of help you out. Dodging, for instance, is a big part, and you'll see when you're in combat a little red exclamation point will flash above an enemy's head, and that will alert you that now you should dodge out of the way. So aside from the combat, there's also the memory remixing, which I mentioned is a big puzzle part of the game. I'm not quite sure how exactly all of that works because, like I said, my demo did get cut off a little bit early, but it seems like that's where a lot of the more emotional aspects of the game come into play. And it almost feels, when you step into somebody else's memory, like you're in a different game. And I think that's really one of the aspects that's going to set this apart from other games who may share similar fighting mechanics or platforming mechanics. The amount of detail in the world is incredible. Like I said, it is a fairly linear game, but there are still opportunities, and plenty of them, where you can deviate off the path and sort of explore on your own and really find sort of nuances that set this apart from other games. So I am super excited about this. There is actually a 10-minute gameplay demo up on YouTube right now, which shows some footage from a little bit later in the game and has things that I didn't even see at all during my playthrough. So I know that I've sort of just touched the tip of the iceberg here. I was excited about this game 2 weeks ago, and now I'm probably doubly so. So this is slated for a May 2013 release date. There's no specific date set yet, and based on how much they've actually shown of the game, I'm not sure if it will really be ready by then. It's been in production for well over 5 years now, so I'm just waiting for it to come out at this point. and we will definitely have more coverage, so stay tuned.